What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be discussing our Week 1 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. So make sure to tune in, and if you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. And lastly, let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get into it. We kick things off with the Cowboys at the Buccaneers. Here, I want a piece of all these wide receivers. For the Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper. I know the expectations are pretty high for CeeDee Lamb. Maybe temper them here a little bit. This is a good Buccaneers defense, and I do think we have been maybe overvaluing CeeDee Lamb a little bit and undervaluing Amari Cooper. However, I will say I think the game flow could be a positive one here for the Dallas passing attack because Buccaneers' run defense is absolutely sensational. The offensive line for the Cowboys taking a hit with some COVID issues. So especially if the Buccaneers go up quickly, the Cowboys even more so might have to pass the football. That's why I'd even throw in Michael Gallup as a decent start here. I think Lamb and Cooper kind of low-end wide receiver ones, high-end wide receiver twos probably if we have to be honest. And then Gallup, a potential, wide receiver, low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 because of the opportunities that I anticipate that you're going to have in this game flow. For the Buccaneers, Evans, Godwin, and Antonio Brown, I want a piece of all of them. But I should say, I think the upside for all of these guys is going to be tremendously limited every single week. I have them in the low-end wide receiver 2 category. Unless you're getting touchdowns for one of these guys, it's going to be tough sledding. Like in PPR formats, hopefully you're going to be getting at least a bump up like for 5-6 receptions per game. And I will say if the Buccaneers go up quickly here versus the Cowboys, this can turn into a run fest for them, which could even more so limit the floor for these wide receivers. But I think it's very fair to say that expectations should be like between 5 and 7 receptions for each one of these guys for between like 50 to 70 yards. And then the difference maker is going to be whoever gets the touchdown, and whoever does will probably be in that high-end wide receiver 2 category. But all these guys have very similar, type of production. I think the preferred options here are probably CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. And I'll be saying this honestly for the Bucs every single game. Just so many mouths to feed for them. Great for Tom Brady, but not all that great for the individual wide receivers in fantasy football purposes. Next up, we got the Seahawks at the Colts. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, as strong of a duo to start a wide receiver as you could want. Yes, the Colts have a pretty good defense, but I anticipate Metcalf and Lockett will both have decent games. High-end wide receiver 2s, in my opinion. Both guys can be inconsistent. Keep that in mind. But for the Colts, this is a sleeper that I really, really like. Michael Pittman, to start off the season, honestly, the Seahawks defense ain't all that scary. And without T.Y. Hilton, I think Michael Pittman will be the number 1 wide receiver for the Colts during that time. I really like his upside. He showed a lot of flashes last year, and Carson Wentz trending towards playing. So checks all the boxes for me. I think Paris Campbell is more so that big play upside in terms of what you're hoping for, the counterpart to Michael Pittman, but I'd still take a chance on him. I'd be sitting Zach Pascal. I don't want to get too cute here. I think Naheem Hines is going to have a big role to play. He's going to have an expanded role without T.Y. Hilton. But honestly, again, the wide receiver I'm most excited about in this matchup might sound funny, a guy that you were probably getting in double-digit rounds. Michael Pittman, I think he can be a high-end wide receiver 2 for this week. Afterwards, we got the Jags at the Texans. I'll start all the wide receivers for the Jaguars versus this absolutely god-awful Texans team. Normally I wouldn't, but I think the upside is tremendous, and I think all these guys can be low-end wide receiver 2s. The way I have them listed is kind of the way that I rank them in this offense. Marvin Jones, DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, Trevor Lawrence, even though he's a rookie and he's going to have inconsistencies, this is probably going to be one of the easiest matchups he's going to face versus the Texans all year long. So I'm in on the Jaguars wide receivers. For the Texans, really only Brandon Cooks, and I'll be honest with you, if Deshaun Watson doesn't play for the Texans, I'm iffy on Brandon Cooks as well because Tyrod Taylor is not a fantasy-friendly quarterback. He just doesn't deliver volume to his wide receivers. But for what it's worth, Cooks is by far and away the best wide receiver on this option. And whoever the quarterback is going to need good wide receiver play to make them better. It's not going to be the other way around. That's why I have zero confidence in Chris Conley and Anthony Miller. Chris is the only guy that I would start for the Texans, but I think he also belongs in the low-end wide receiver 2 category, maybe even lower. This is one where you just, have to keep an eye out what happens with the whole Deshaun Watson saga. If Watson plays, then it's a whole different story, but right now my guess would be that he does not take the field for the Texans in week 1. Moving on, Eagles at the Falcons. For the Eagles, I'll take a chance in Devonta Smith. I think the opportunity will be there. I don't really like the other wide receiver options they have, like Jalen Reagor. I wasn't all that impressed by him last season. And they do have a lot of tight ends that they use with Dallas Goedert, with Zach Ertz. And for what it's worth, Jalen Hurts is kind of a run-first quarterback. So for that reason, only one wide receiver I'd take a chance on for the Eagles. But I don't think the upside is all that big for Devonta Smith. Much rather start the Falcons wide receiver here. Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage. Ridley is going to be like a top 5 wide receiver every single week, regardless of the fact that Julio Jones is gone. Ridley proved he can get it done last year without Julio Jones. It'll be the case again this season. And Russell Gage, a lot of people are sleeping on Russell Gage. I think he's going to be an really good bargain player this season long. I'd be honestly all right potentially this week having him as a wide receiver 2 because everybody is hyping up Kyle Pitts, but Russell Gage, I think especially when the season first starts, he's going to be surprising a lot of people in a good way. He showed that he could get it done last season without Julio Jones. The Falcons are a pass-heavy team. They will continue to do so while Matt Ryan is their quarterback, continuously top 5 in pass attempts. I could see this being a high-scoring affair, so I really like the wide receiver options for the Falcons. And honestly, like Russell Gage, I would have higher than really any of the Philadelphia wide receiver options for what that's worth. Next up, Chargers at Washington. Only really want to start the stars here for the two teams, Keenan Allen and Terry McLaurin. I think they both belong kind of in the high-end wide receiver 2 category. If it's full PPR scoring, hopefully, they can salvage a tough matchup because both these defenses are pretty good. That's why I don't really love Mike Williams or Curtis Samuel or Adam Humphries for Washington. Yes, Justin Herbert, up-and-coming quarterback, high upside for the entire team. But this matchup in general, Washington, one of the toughest defenses in the league. And then for Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think McLaurin is the alpha wide receiver here. Yes, he's got chemistry with Adam Humphries, who, if Curtis Samuel maybe misses this game, kind of right now, questionable, we're not sure. I might take a chance on Adam Humphries, but that would be desperation mode, because I do think this game has the potential to be relatively lower scoring compared to some of the other games. And for that reason, only looking at the superstars here, and even they, in my opinion, are in the wide receiver 2 category. Afterwards, Steelers at the Bills. Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool for the Steelers. And for Pittsburgh, it's going to be tough to decide between Claypool and Juju Smith-Schuster, in my opinion, every single week. Deontay Johnson is the top guy on the offense. We saw it last season, and I think that'll continue to be the case in 2021. If you're desperate, okay, and in PPR format, I'll take a chance on Juju Smith-Schuster since he got a lot of volume for short passes last season, 5-6 catches for 20, 30 yards, but that's not exactly screaming upside either, so that's the problem there. For the Bills, Stephon Diggs, he's, again, a must-start every single week. He's the number 1 wide receiver for this team, a top-tier wide receiver in 2021. And then, again, this gets a little bit intriguing. I think this is going to be a battle that I'm paying a lot of attention to. Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley. How are these guys utilized? I give the slight edge to Emmanuel Sanders. I think he's going to be kind of that John Brown role after he left this offseason. And to me, that has higher upside than Cole Beasley. But again, if you're desperate, I think you could kind of compare Cole Beasley and Juju Smith-Schuster. Does have some high upside in terms of scoring here, even though the Steelers' defense very good. But the Bills offensively are so great that I could see a decent amount of points being put up here. So if you're really, really desperate, Juju and Cole Beasley. But I think they're no higher than wide receiver 3s this week. Afterwards, 49ers at the Lions. The wide receiver I'm most excited about here is Deebo Samuel because, stop us if you've heard this before, but the 49ers are dealing with injuries. Brandon Ayuk dealing with a hammy. Might not play in this game. And if he doesn't, I think Deebo Samuel actually has wide receiver 1 upside because the Lions defensively, no bueno. So the 49ers, a lot of scoring upside here for them. For the Lions, I'm on Ross St. Brown. I think he's going to be a sleeper this entire year. Tyrell Williams if you don't want to play it a little bit safer, probably give the edge to Tyrell Williams. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to get it going towards, the latter part of the season, but I do believe him. I think the volume will be there. Showed some really nice flashes during camp. And with that being the case, obviously there's still DeAndre Swift, guys like TJ Hawkinson that'll probably lead the Lions, every other week and something like that in terms of receptions, maybe even yardages, because I wouldn't be shocked if Hawkinson is the leading pass catcher for this entire team. But as far as wide receivers for the Lions, I think St. Brown and Tyrell Williams are the guys to know. If Brendan Ayuk plays, then I would start him as well. And, Deebo Samuel and Ayuk probably then belong in the wide receiver 2 category. Next up, Vikings at the Bengals. I'm starting Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. That's extremely, extremely easy. This Bengals defense, no good. And I said it with Dalvin Cook. I'll say it for these wide receivers. This is a great matchup for them. I think they all have tremendous upside. Higher upside for Jefferson in the wide receiver 1 category, but Thielen, high-end wide receiver 2 versus the Bengals. And for Cincinnati, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. It's going to be tough, again, to predict the second and third wide receiver offensively. I think T. Higgins is the number 1 wide receiver, the one you want to own for the Bengals in the wide receiver 2 category for me this week. In PPR, Tyler Boyd is a guy that I think is somewhat safe. And then Jamar Chase is kind of that high upside dart throw, but hasn't looked good in the preseason. I think coaches right now kind of trust Tyler Boyd a little bit more so. So it could be a while until kind of Jamar Chase comes out, develops, and maybe to kick off the season isn't the exact time to have him inserted in your starting lineups for fantasy football. Afterwards, Jets at the Panthers. Here, I much rather prefer the Jets wide receivers, as crazy as that sounds. Corey Davis and Elijah Moore. I should have an asterisk next to Elijah Moore because this could be dependent on if Jamison Crowder plays or not. His status has kind of been up in the air, injury, COVID, et cetera, et cetera. So he's not exactly sure if he's going to be available in week 1. And that could potentially open up the door for Elijah Moore. I actually think this will be a very high-scoring affair, back and forth. Neither one of these defenses scares me. And I think that Davis and Moore have high-end wide receiver 2 potential. If Crowder plays, then not as excited about Elijah Moore, obviously. I would still have Corey Davis as a high-end wide receiver, too. For the Panthers, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. And look, yes, last year the Panthers had 3 fantasy-relevant wide receivers with Moore, Anderson, and Curtis Samuel. But with Christian McCaffrey back, I think it's going to be a whole different story this season. Moore is still the wide receiver I prefer out of this trio, but I think there's, again, going to be inconsistencies. But right now, I give the edge to Moore and Robbie Anderson. Terrace Marshall, though, don't sleep on him. He's looked like the best rookie wide receiver this year, especially if you look at the preseason. He's got a connection with the coaching staff there in Joe Brady and LSU. And, I think that this is going to be a high-scoring affair. So if you're looking for a dart throw, potentially Terrace Marshall. But again, with Christian McCaffrey, I do think it caps the upside for all of these wide receivers for the Panthers. Next up, Cardinals at the Titans. I'll start DeAndre Hopkins and potentially dart throw with Christian Kirk. Hopkins, again, he's a top-end wide receiver, the top preferred option for Kyler Murray. I think this could be a high-scoring affair here again. Kirk, I give him the slight edge over A.J. Green. Yes, A.J. Green, extremely talented, but, on a new system, we always have to worry about injuries with him. And he's another guy, I kind of want to see how the Cardinals utilize him. Maybe in a week, 2 weeks from now, you'll see A.J. Green as a start and Christian Kirk as a sit. But for the time being, I first want to see what A.J. Green has before committing to starting him. But for the Titans, pretty easy here. I'm starting both A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. I think they both have, potentially low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 upside. I like the upside for A.J. Brown more so, younger, better chemistry with Ryan Tannehill, knows the system better. But I love both of the Titans wide receivers here. Afterwards, Browns at the Chiefs. I'll start Odell and Jarvis Landry. Normally, probably not as high on them in other weeks, but versus the Chiefs, I think this will be a very high-scoring affair. So they both kind of land as low-end wide receiver 2s because still the Browns are going to focus on running the football. Then for the Chiefs, it's a no-brainer. Tyreek Hill is a must-start. But other than him, like, I'm not going to get cute with Mecole Hardman. We say it every single year. Oh, is this going to be the year that wide receiver 2 for the Chiefs develops? No, that's Travis Kelce at tight end, and potentially a little bit of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And DPJ for the Browns, I know he's been getting a lot of hype this offseason, preseason, but I think here it's going to be the primary guys in Odell and Jarvis Landry and then the rushing attack. So I would be fading DPJ for now. Moving on, we got the Dolphins at the Patriots. Really a game I don't like for fantasy football purposes. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair. The only wide receiver I'm going to take a shot on is Jacoby Myers, primarily in PPR formats. Obviously, Mac Jones being the quarterback, probably a little bit of a improvement for the wide receivers, but I think this could potentially be an ugly game. I just have Jacoby Myers as the highest ranked Patriots wide receiver, but low end wide receiver 2, maybe even in the wide receiver 3 category for the Dolphins. I'm sitting Waddle, I'm sitting Devontae Parker. The Patriots have a good defense. I still need to see more from Tua as a passer of the football in these divisional games. 2 good defenses. I'd rather just pass on, honestly, the majority of these fantasy options, especially at wide receiver in week 1. Afterwards, Broncos at the Giants. Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. I prefer starting the Broncos wide receivers here with Teddy Bridgewater. I think, it's a better situation than with Drew Lock. Teddy Bridgewater was able to make, Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore fantasy relevant. So for that reason, I'm all right with Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, but they both probably low-end wide receiver 2s. Giants defense is all right. Jerry Jeudy probably the preferred option in PPR formats. Sutton also obviously still coming off that major injury last year, so maybe if you want to be a little bit more conservative with him, I understand that. Then for the Giants, this is tough because I really don't want to start any pass catchers for them. Like, I don't believe in Daniel Jones at all. And this Broncos defense, a very good unit, and I think this could be a low-scoring affair for both teams. Kenny Golladay has kind of been dealing with an injury all offseason long, so tough to believe in him, even though I do think he's talented and has the highest upside out of all these wide receivers. And then Sterling Shepard, I'm not even going to mention Darius Slayton. I think Shepard is the number 2 wide receiver here. Saquon Barkley is going to be back, so they're going to try and utilize him. There's Evan Ingram, there's Kyle Rudolph, so just a lot of mouths here, a very tough matchup, below average quarterback, so that translates to sitting these guys for now for the Giants. Then we go to the Packers at the Saints. Devontae Adams, he is a must start every single week, no matter what, so enough said there. Saints, Marquez Callaway, the darling of the offseason for the Saints with Jameis Winston under quarterback. Maybe you can even make the case that a Traquan Smith could be a fringe guy. But Marquez Callaway, I think a low-end wide receiver 2. Obviously, we don't have much to go off of other than what we've seen kind of in the preseason. But Callaway has shown the flashes. I wouldn't, bank everything on him to deliver for you because, again, the sample size isn't large and I don't want to base everything off preseason. But this could be a high-scoring affair, and Callaway should have opportunities for the Packers. I'm sitting Randall Cobb here. Obviously, the trade that sent him to the Packers from Houston was kind of a big news at one point in time, but I do think he has passed his prime. Mainly here for the Packers, Devontae Adams, like Aaron Jones, like usual, I think will be the main names to know. Then we go to the Bears at the Rams. I'll start Allen Robinson. Andy Dalton is going to be the starter for the Bears week 1 unless anything changes like last minute, and I think that's a good thing for Allen Robinson. I think he's going to get a lot of targets. The primary read for the Bears, usually Robinson. I think Andy Dalton kind of in that same situation as a Mitch Trubisky, where he mainly goes to his first read and then just targets them. So good thing for Robinson, but very, very tough matchup. I think all the wide receivers here are in the wide receiver 2 category. I like the upside much more for Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, though. Even though the Bears defense is good, I don't think it's quite on the level as the Rams defense. And obviously, I love the quarterback much more so. Matthew Stafford over Andy Dalton every day of the week and twice on Saturday. But you get the point. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, I will probably have them ranked right next to each other all year long. I think they have very similar upside, and I love them here. Darnell Mooney is a sit for me. He's a popular breakout for a lot of people, but the number 2 option for this team versus a great defense, I'm passing on him. And finally, we've got the Ravens at the Raiders. Here, I'll start Sammy Watkins and Rashad Bateman if Bateman plays, but it's funny, Watkins, even though I'm not a big fan of his, he might have another week where he just gets it done at the beginning of the regular season and then, The rest of the season, not so much, but right now, the Ravens, the pass catcher is pretty banged up. Watkins trending like he's going to play. He could be one of the only options for Baltimore in a good matchup. The Raiders defense, not that imposing. So Watkins could end up winning you guys some weeks here, as funny as that sounds. I probably have him in the low end wide receiver 2 category, but huge upside. If Bateman plays, I'd also take a chance on him. Probably, it's a stretch if he plays. If that's the case, then could put Marquise Brown as a start. But again, you're going to be looking for the upside there because the floor not all that high. That's going to be the case pretty much for all these Ravens wide receivers until Rashad Bateman returns. Then for the Raiders, this is a tough matchup. I'm not a believer in Henry Ruggs or Bryan Edwards yet, so I would really sit both of them. I think really the only guy that you can trust on this offense is Darren Waller. And other than that, I don't like the options for the Raiders fantasy-wise in week 1. But with that, we wrap up this breakdown for week 1 fantasy wide receivers to start and sit. Let us hear in the comment section, did you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have had? If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.